It's not showing the recording on my end, but I'm not going to worry about it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our two-part series on Jupiter in Aquarius. Tonight, we're going to look at part one, Jupiter in Aquarius through the archetypes, and we'll look at the cycles too. I'll just say right off the bat that part two is going to be rescheduled. Main reason is we're getting new shingles on our house that day, and it is going to be pretty chaotic here for several days, and that's not really conducive to work. So we are rescheduling Jupiter and Aquarius through all 12 houses to Monday, December 28th. Monday, December 28th for part two. Leroy will make those changes and you will get the notice the day before and an hour before as normal if you would like to participate in it live.
Kim, just a little note to the people that are on right now. Thank you for being here. And I have not modified a webinar series yet with GoToWebinar. You know, we've been pretty consistent on getting them done in two parts. So I have to make that change. I'm pretty sure it'll be the same link that you've just received. I'm pretty sure it'll be the same one. If not, always check your inbox because I may have to I may have to modify the webinar series, and that might provide us another link that you'll have to, again, use to register with the part two. So I'm uncertain about that. I'm pretty sure we can get it done, but haven't done it before, so heads up.
All right, Mini Monk, thank you. All right, as we get started here, first of all, our two housekeeping slides. Here are all of the major offerings that we have for learning evolutionary astrology here at EAN. And when you get the PDF of the PowerPoint slides, these links are hyperactive. You can use these links from your computer or device and go directly to these pages on our website. And we have been in the midst of offering a discount on our course materials. Leroy and I are in process of combining segment 2 and it used to be segment 3, health and wellness astrology. We are combining those two segments and now offering both those and the beginnings at a discount. So if you are interested in adding on everything else to your EA materials, now will be a good opportunity and time to do that. So as we jump right in here to Jupiter in Aquarius, you'll see the dates on the top of your screen as when Jupiter makes that passage through. And I find it quite interesting that between December 19th and May 13th, 5 months, Jupiter goes all the way through 30 degrees of Aquarius. So just starting right out, if the first half of the year feels just a little hurried, if it feels like things are changing faster than you can keep up with, this can be some of it. Because whereas the archetype of Capricorn has a specific rulership of space and time, Aquarius being the third of the air element, the third sign of the air element, there's this tendency for Aquarius to feel like it's speeding up time. It's air, it's mental, it doesn't want to be tied down by the physicality of Earth. And as you can see, then Jupiter is going to dip 2 months into Pisces, and then it's going to go back into Aquarius for 5 more months, as you can see on your screen, from July 12th to December 29th. With Jupiter, I always like to put the previous times that it's in Aquarius because you can reflect back to, say, 2009, 1997, 85. As you can see these on your screen, you can do some self-reflections on these, and especially if you are looking at the sign Aquarius with whatever house or houses it happens to reside in. you can look to see if there may be any themes going on for you relative to that. I'll put this slide in part 2 because as we go through the 12 houses, it will then spark memory perhaps on these last transits that Jupiter moved through Aquarius. I also right off the bat just want to show you the Jupiter dates for its retrograde cycle, and I did include the pre and post shadows. When we start to move into the outer planets, and we can include Jupiter, Saturn in there, and then on outward from that, by the time we look at the pre-shadow and the post-shadow, in other words, those degrees that they cover 3 times with the retrograde cycle, it can start to make up most of the calendar year with these outer planets. So it's an interesting, little bit concept to look at. Now, as you see on your screen here, whenever Jupiter goes retrograde 4 months out of the year, it's always retrograde for 10 degrees. Whatever degree it starts, if you can put it in your memory banks, it's going to go back 10 degrees. In this case, it's going to go retrograde on the summer solstice, June 20th, 2 degrees Pisces, and it will go back to 22 degrees Aquarius before it turns stationary direct on October 18th. We'll glance at this slide again as we look at some of the Jupiter aspects it will make with other planets throughout this year. I like this slide. This is actually a picture of one of my bee balms that was out in my yard one summer, and I went and played with it and made it a very pretty psychedelic color. But this is something that I'm always sharing with beginners of evolutionary astrology on the Jupiter archetype, and it doesn't hurt for all of us to remember this. Jupiter expands anything it touches. If you ever look at someone's chart and they have Jupiter aspecting something, whatever they aspect, whatever planet that is, Jupiter just intensifies it, increases it, expands it. And Jupiter's effect, going to excess and extreme, is from 100% positive to 100% negative. It's good and bad. So you've just got to do that, observe and correlate to see how something is actually working in somebody's chart, specifically with this archetype of Jupiter. Now, basically, Jupiter in Aquarius is going to come down to 2 sentences. I've put them as questions. Will the polarities that we see going on everywhere in the world increase and continue to divide us apart, you versus me, us versus them, race versus race, country versus country, etc.? Or will enough of the collective, beginners of astrology will know Aquarius is like-mindedness, Aquarius is friendship, Aquarius is the community, the tribe, social groups. Will the masses rise up and demand fairness for all? And as you can see, I went and looked at all of the many different risings up and protesting in the streets on about every subject you can imagine. I just went and clipped pictures off the internet of, again, take your pick, every issue. If you look right there in the center, though, in red, what are you going to do? How are you going to be a part of moving things forward? Jupiter in Aquarius. Before we move into that, though, let's just quickly look at the archetype of Jupiter itself. In evolutionary astrology, a planet, a sign, and a house are an interchangeable or the same archetype. There's 12 archetypes. So Jupiter Sag in the 9th house is the principle of our right brain, our intuition, or our sixth sense, how we tap into those larger forces of knowledge out there in the universe. It is the principle of growth, how we can learn and then assimilate and integrate something new into our world. That's that expansion of Jupiter. This archetype is also the principle of timeless universal laws and spiritual understandings, or the short term in EA is natural law. In other words, the fundamental laws and principles in the universe are the same for all individuals and cultures, yet we conceive it, conceptualize it, and express it in a diversity of cultural and individual ways. For instance, condensing these universal laws down into various religions. There are currently 3,500 organized religions on planet Earth. Who's right? Who's wrong? What are the underlying principles that are universal amongst all of these various religions? This archetype is also the principle of our conscious belief systems. In other words, what belief system or religion have we been born into? What do we search for in regards for our beliefs in any given lifetime? And how do we evolve those belief systems just through the natural process of life's experiences? This archetype is the principle of seeking knowledge through study. It rules in the US, we call it K-12 education. It rules higher education. It rules traditional and alternative education. We can seek knowledge through direct experience, and it rules travel. When we travel, we go to a different culture, a different country, different belief systems, and we learn from that. Now, included within this, though, is the concept of alienation. And this exists with Jupiter Sag in the 9th house. And we can be alienated from another person on an individual level. We can do it on a societal level. The purpose of alienation is to eliminate anything that will allow us a direct understanding of those natural cosmological principles. It is a trigger to open up and increase our own intuitive thought. And so, from the perspective of evolutionary astrology, we don't necessarily look at alienation as something wrong or bad. And we can see an increase of that in the archetype of Aquarius, when that archetype has to learn how to be a group of one and learn who it is before it can find what groups it wants to associate and connect with. This archetype is the principle of language communications, along with its polarity, Mercury, Gemini, and third house. Third thought. On the Jupiter side, it's conceptual thought, and we must then learn how to take those conceptions and speak them in words and language that somebody else will understand. And if we look at the evolution of language across the planet, in the East, a lot of the languages are based upon concepts. For instance, your Far East, China, Japan, you see their symbols, and just a little bitty, variation brings through a whole different understanding of a concept. Whereas in our Western languages that have been developed more typically later, we have a lot of words, and the word is a fact, it's a detail, it's an object, it becomes very specific rather than a concept. And so all of us are having to learn how to balance speaking conceptually, intuitively, and speaking in detail in such a way that we're understood. This archetype is the principle of confrontations. We hear Gemini always exposing the weakest link to something, but Sagittarius does too. If you know somebody who has a lot of Sag in their chart, they can be very good debaters. And so what happens with this polarity is we get confrontations to expose where we're limited in our beliefs or our knowledge. And those limitations then have to be busted through. and we expand our understanding. And we also have confrontations to expose the whole truth versus lies of this polarity as well. And one of the things that we can do when we're not standing in our truth is we compensate. A Sagittarius can misspeak the truth as well as Gemini. It's both can do it. And when we don't have the courage to stand in our truth, we compensate on our truth. And, well, I'm going to say what I think you're going to want to hear so that you like me. And as we evolve with this archetype of Jupiter, it's learning what is our individual truth and then being able to walk our talk, to speak it, to live it. And then it's also learning to progress from what may be a universal truth a personal truth for us, but it's limited still in that universal timeless truth. So sometimes those confrontations that we go through are to bust a bubble in our belief system that then allows us to question what we've known and believed and be able to expand upon it into a larger understanding. We also will look at this archetype of Jupiter Sag in ninth as the principle of experiencing the visions of the future. That intuition can not only tap into the past, it can also tap into the future. And of course, it may or may not be an accurate vision. On an individual basis, sometimes we really can have an accurate vision of the future. The goosebumps stand up on our arms. But we can also have what we will call the reflection of our subconscious desires, something that our soul wants on such a deep level that it can create what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. I keep getting this intuitive hit that the lover who, left me for someone else is going to come back. And how long do we go through this before we recognize that we've put so much desire and will into it that vision is projected out there rather than something that might be objective. This is where Jupiter and Aquarius will be good at helping us objectify any visions we may receive, and are they actively reflecting the directions where we're going to go. More on that later. And then sometimes, when these visions are not quite accurate, it can be denial of self-responsibility. I don't want to, be responsible for having to put the effort in to evolve my career or create this relationship with someone. This is where we get the distortions of the archetype being, Pollyanna. I just want it, so it's going to, actually happen. Well, what are we doing to create it? Now, we also can experience visions that are collective or planetary, which also may or may not be accurate, because humanity as a collective has free choice to evolve or de-evolve. We're watching some de-evolution going on right now, for instance, in the United States, where there are tens of millions of people who refuse to see reality and the fact that Donald Trump did not win the election in November. So just backing up a little bit for us, because Jupiter is 12 years around the zodiac, so it spends approximately 1 year in each sign. In 2019, Jupiter in its own sign, Sagittarius, started a brand new 12-year solar cycle. So all the archetypes that we just talked about were double downed, twice as energetic in 2019. And it brought about new individual and collective visions and rebirths of our belief systems. Now, again, it was doing it on an evolutionary direction, and it can do it on a de-evolutionary direction, depending upon how insecure or clinging to the past we may be. But just think back for a moment for your own life and where Jupiter in Sag was with you and what happened in your world in 2019. If we want to look at it collectively, we were seeing a US presidential race heat up. We were seeing Democrats take over the US House in 2019 was when they were bringing forth all of their, new bills on expanding universal health care or creating the $15 minimum wage, to use a couple of examples. 2020 has been Jupiter in Capricorn, and we're just finishing it up down to the last few days until it goes into Aquarius December 19th. So what always happens with Capricorn following Sag is those beliefs get condensed down into new realities and even further into laws. And in evolutionary astrology, we have two basic understandings of natural law: the principle of inclusiveness, where it's about giving, sharing, and including resources, and exclusiveness, the patriarchal distortions, as we will call them, where it's about taking, hoarding, and excluding. So as we move into 21 with Jupiter in Aquarius, which laws that we have created in the last few years or longer, looking back, which reality structures, especially here in 2020, just no longer work, are exposed for their own limitations? And how are we going to be reforming our laws? How are we going to be reforming these reality structures coming off of Capricorn and moving into Aquarius? And all this is going to be based upon how we are evolving our belief systems with Jupiter in Aquarius. So, first of all, there's going to be expanding awareness of how our own individuated unconsciousness affects our belief systems, affects our evolution, affects societal functions individually and collectively. And this is because Aquarius, the 11th house, and Uranus as an archetype is the individuated unconsciousness in EA. It's what we call the unconscious mind or far memory. It's what exists below that surface. And that individuated unconsciousness contains three types of material: past, present, and future. Contains the past in all its detail of this life, earlier back to childhood, etc., and past lives. And we can access this with spontaneous memories. You can expect with Jupiter and Aquarius to periodically just have a spontaneous memory from your childhood or past lives. It can even come in your dream world, but you can have spontaneous memories just pop into consciousness when we have Aquarian transits, especially the slower moving outer planets. We access that through past life regression, hypnotherapy, breath work. Jupiter is kind of, some feel Jupiter has some rulership of the Akashic records. When our intuition taps into knowledge and we know something, but we don't know how we know it, we're actually tapping into those Akashic records. And so Aquarius and Sag are sextile on the zodiac. And they're both the active polarity or energy moving outward. Sextiles are, just by nature of how they go around the circle, friendly with each other. They get along. There is an energy because of that same polarity. And so we can make use of tapping in to all of this past consciously, in addition to it just spontaneously coming through. As we have Jupiter transit through Aquarius, it can naturally be a good time period to do some of this past life work if you're so inclined, or to go back into your childhood and see how the trauma and pain of something still affects you. The individuated unconsciousness contains anything in the present that is suppressed. Saturn, individuated conscious mind. Uranus, individuated unconscious mind. So whatever we don't want to deal with, whatever we're voiding, wherever we, don't want to address it, we just throw it aside. It goes below the surface. Well, when planets go through Aquarius, guess what? That present keeps popping up into our face, and we might as well deal with whatever we've been avoiding because it's not going to go anywhere. And then one of the biggies is that this individuated unconsciousness contains a blueprint to the future. And in EA, that shows up through repetitious future orientated messages. And the rule of thumb is that if something about the future pops up on its own once or twice, fantasy, wishful thinking, or way down the road 10, 15 years, and Jupiter and Aquarius can give us those visions long term into the future. The ones we want to pay attention to are those future-orientated messages that come up again, all on their own while they're living life. That is where our own soul is intending us to move towards now, in the future, over this next year with Jupiter in Aquarius. And so throughout this transit, and this is reiterated by Saturn in Aquarius 21, 22, the two of them together in 21 mean, together in Aquarius, this past, present, and future memories and visions and ideas are all going to be popping up into our consciousness at the same time. And past, present, and future are all going to be striving for our attention. And we've got to then, once in a while with Jupiter, maybe give ourselves some space to go, oh gosh, all right, so this issue keeps bugging me in my current life in the moment, but I realize that it's also related to old patterns. How do I want to address them? Because if we don't want to address that past, it will continue to have an effect upon the present and the future. And if we can address it, and we'll work with the concept of trauma with Aquarius here in another couple of slides, the reason we want to address the past is so that we stop projecting it forward, so that our soul can break free and evolve and do that Aquarian energy of feeling like we're speeding up time and really making progress. And then we also want to, one more time, deal with whatever we're currently suppressing. And this is one that you can spend time working with this, because there's such a strong desire within our soul and our ego to be secure that we don't want to look at anything that rocks the boat. And yet rocking the boat is what Aquarius does. And here's Jupiter to try and help us understand it rather than avoid it or pretend it doesn't exist. And then, of course, again, when we're looking at those blueprints of the future, when they pop up in between past and present all together, clairvoyant is seeing it, clairaudient is hearing, clairsentient is sensing it, feeling it, the emotions. And we can have all three active, or depending upon our soul and its own planetary archetypes, we may have one ability more dominant than the other when it comes to us looking forward. Now, another strong principle of Aquarius is trauma. And so Jupiter in Aquarius offers us an opportunity to understand how strongly trauma imprints and affects not only our belief systems, but how we live our lives as well. Definition of trauma: an intense disturbance caused by a shocking event or stress that has a lasting effect. And it's important to point out here that why Aquarius, which is fixed air, okay, or non-moving mental, it's important to point out here, though, that with trauma, it can happen on all four levels. If you put someone, what we call the guru, on a spiritual pedestal, and he or she shows their humanness and doesn't walk their talk, it can be intensely disappointing and even traumatizing. And of course, if any of you are not aware of this, Leroy and I have lost 3 family members in the last 4 months. These are close family members, a brother-in-law, a brother, and a father. And so, and for me, it was my dad. My father, today's the 14th. My father passed November 18th unexpectedly from a fall. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the archetype of Aquarius and pondering thoughts in my head, and um, even future webinars of really going into this whole concept a little bit stronger, a little bit more detail. What happens if we have one of these traumatic events or the stress? Who of us are not experiencing trauma as stress if we have a loved one experiencing COVID and they end up in the hospital? Leroy lost his brother to COVID and he was in the hospital for almost 3 weeks. That is a stressful event. And so when we do not really address these intense disturbances, if we push them below the surface and ignore them, they go subconscious and they start to dictate our behaviors. And with Jupiter in Aquarius, they can dictate our belief systems. The world is a very scary place. Nothing's safe with this virus. They dictate how we are actually start to live our lives without us maybe even knowing it. And from the perspective of evolutionary astrology, we feel that 85 to 90% of souls are born with past life trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. What we have? Finally, the Iraq War, and the military actually acknowledged PTSD as a medical, what would I call it? Medical category. And so, along with Saturn in Aquarius, our past life traumatic imprints are coming up into consciousness. And this will be really strong during the time periods that Jupiter is retrograde and that Saturn is retrograde in Aquarius. Because when we get to this summer and these 2 planets are retrograde for 4 months, that's going to be the natural time period to open the door to the unconscious and have traumatic old memories and patterns come up to the surface so that we can understand them, Jupiter, make sense of them, heal them, break free from them. So when we experience trauma, we have to make that persistent effort to change its effect. And so while Aquarius represents trauma, It also represents the ability to detach from it and objectify what's happening. And in this case, Jupiter in Aquarius, to be able to objectify our beliefs. And of course, what we want to do in this type of webinar is look at things from a broader perspective, such as reincarnation and what we call these natural spiritual principles and laws. In other words, no one gets out of here alive. We all will transition out of this physical body and back to our spirit body. And I feel that for me personally, it is 30 plus years of evolutionary astrology and 15 years of Roger Wolger's deep memory processing, his past life regression methods. I've done a lot to help me heal my own traumas and to not be so traumatized with someone passing. And in my case specifically, to continue to speak to both of my brother-in-laws and my father as they are learning things on the other side. So as we have Jupiter in Aquarius, there can be increased interest in alternative therapies that work through healing trauma, as well as traditional therapies. My next few slides here, and again, this is instead of suppressing it to work through it, because if we want to look at what's been going on in 2020 with the virus, all of us are being affected by trauma, personally and collectively. Contagion is an Aquarius word, and there are two definitions to it. The psychological or mental definition, the spread of a behavioral pattern, attitude, or emotion from person to person or group to group through suggestion, put out information, propaganda, rumor, or imitation. So look at the refusal of some people to wear masks to suppress the transmission of disease. Look at the refusal of some people to recognize that Donald Trump lost the US presidential election. We have a lot of psychological contagions going on. Jupiter in Aquarius can increase the split. It can increase these contagions. There can be those who absolutely refuse to recognize the physical reality that is in front of their face. Jupiter has blind belief in whatever they have been led to believe. We also have, though, physical contagions, and this is the communication of a disease from one person to another by close contact or the exchange of fluids. Just think back in history to HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, and how that caused a contagion and fear with sexuality and sexual partners and who can we trust or not trust. Well, 2020, we've been dealing with the mutation of a coronavirus. They've been around for a long time. They continue to mutate, and the ones that turn out to be so deadly for us tend to be those that mutate from an animal to a human, and we don't have the antibodies naturally built up in our immune system to fight it off. I'm not going to get into the politics of whether this coronavirus was man-made or natural. My tendency is to think, use the word think, it is probably a naturally mutating virus. It's been happening forever. And it's not to say that somebody didn't mess with something in a lab. I don't have enough information to pretend to be the gospel one way or another. I leave that to everyone to research on their own and for humanity to bring out with time. However, it spread. It has changed life on planet Earth this year. And probably the biggest thing for those of us who live in the United States, why others around the rest of the world look at us in disbelief, Jupiter. We have about 4.5% of the world's population. We have 20% of the world's COVID-19 cases and deaths. How can the richest country on earth have 300,000 people die of a disease? Can you see the fallacy of we're supposed to have the greatest healthcare system in the world? Maybe we do, but it's not universally available for everybody. And boy, is this going to be an issue next year. Than the rest of the decade with Jupiter, Saturn, and then Pluto and Aquarius. The point is that contagions can quite easily create individual and collective trauma. And in this case, the physical contagion is imprinting it from the spread of a virus. It knows no class, no race, no political or religious or geographical boundaries. It is shocking for all of us. And to think that if we've got the first vaccine, it's all going to go away. No, no. Jupiter in Aquarius 21, Saturn in Aquarius 21, 22 are going to guarantee that we are going to be dealing with the effects of this trauma for several years. First of all, there are just long-term physical side effects from those who have been through COVID-19. Leroy and I have been through it with no side effects. Due to my other work, the energetic balancing, I do have a slide on it. But we are dealing with family members, specifically a family member who is having all kinds of long-term side effects. Everything that has been dormant for this family member who had the virus basically first half of September, second half of September, first half of October. And we're now this family member who will remain gender neutral. 2 months passed and is still having all kinds of flare-ups of every dormant or underlying disease issue they've had. And multiply that person by millions, if not tens of millions, as time goes by. So these long-term physical effects, these long-term psychological or contagion effects are going to be processed and studied for years. With Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, you're going to see therapies come through next year for processing the trauma of COVID-19. Who knows? There may be some of you on this webinar or in the alternative world who actually come up with some of these methodologies. I've actually talked to a local therapist who I've known a long time, body therapist, and as the fears of traveling and social distancing start to recede, we're looking at the possibility of working together. I don't think it'll be next summer, probably a year from now, next fall, and just doing some therapeutic work together for people who are, for instance, healthcare workers and been affected by COVID. So we're going to see a potential here to really change healthcare systems worldwide and how governments respond to communicable diseases. It's not walking away from the World Health Organization, even when you disagree with Bill Gates influencing it. We still have to have some dialogue and networking worldwide for whenever the next communicable disease comes through. Of course, none of this is guaranteed. We could really watch over the next year an increasing disparity from the effects of COVID-19 for those in poverty who have been pushed into poverty, of course, for children, and of course, the morbidity, which is anybody who has a health issue and is somewhat compromised. Also, I just want to say that both long-term benefits and side effects to vaccines that are going to come along in 2021, they're still unknown. It's going to be a trial and error. And this is why we have some people who may or may not take a vaccine. Here again, I'm going to be politically neutral because with things like polio and malaria, there's a place for some vaccines, and there are areas where they have really moved um, health of masses forward. I will just say that for each of you, as Jupiter goes into Aquarius, you must search for the knowledge yourself. And you must make the intuitive decision, Jupiter, for yourself on whether or not you choose to participate in getting a vaccine. Saturn in Aquarius, it's going to be your own individual responsibility on what you choose to do. I'm not saying you blindly, refuse to get vaccine because, they're putting a chip in you so they can control you or whatever conspiracy theory you want to think of. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's for each of us to be individually responsible, Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, and look to our own knowledge and make our own intuitive decisions. In regards to the herd immunity, maybe we'll start to see at the end of Saturn in Aquarius, which is late 22, early 23. With this specific coronavirus, COVID-19, I don't think we're going to see that natural herd immunity start to develop until we look at Pluto going into Aquarius. And who knows, by that time, Pluto in Aquarius may bring us a whole nother contagion. Evolutionary astrology looks at Pluto as the ruler of viruses, bacteria, fungi, and prions. Prions are incomplete proteins. Think of mad cow disease. I happen to know from my energy balancing world, we have hundreds and hundreds of prions, and they don't just eat away at the brain, they exist in all organs and tissues of our body. We'll also look at with this whole contagion thing through Jupiter and Sag and Saturn. Social distancing may become a new norm for the near future. Near future, I mean the next 1 to 2 years, at least. There is there are those Aquarian light bulbs of awareness going off that we can't be in denial of germs. And in the same time, I think it will have an effect of all of us recognizing that we've really got to create immune systems that are as healthy as possible with diet, exercise, and rest to be as strong as we can individually and collectively for whenever the next one comes around. And the way our world interacts with each other now, Jupiter traveling all over the place, hopping all over the world, future mutations of germs in general can have more and more contagion diseases increasingly in shorter periods of time. So the coming Aquarian age, no one knows the date. We will really have to look at leaps of growth in how we work with exposure to virus, bacteria, etc. So Jupiter in Aquarius is going to help us in choosing to objectify and liberate from our belief systems. So liberation on an egoic basis, it requires us to have the courage to be that group of one. Aquarius is always looking for its tribe. It's always looking for those that we are connected to. We don't know who that really is unless we know who we are, unless we know how to be our own unique individual self and stand in what we feel to be a truth for us, and to evolve that truth as it presents itself. We have to be that group of one. How many of us are okay with that? How many of us can do that? And so what will happen as we need to detach, objectify, and really, take a look at what we choose to believe, both individually and collectively, there's a tendency to fall into three categories towards evolution, Jupiter, when there's a transit through Aquarius. There will be those who just charge forward. Let's go for it. I'm ready for the new. I want to change. The avant-garde, the rebels, the progressives, the visionaries. This is the Uranian choice to change and evolution. Then there are those who defend the past, more consensus or security conscious. There's a fear of the future and a fear to change. These people or choices are more Saturnian. I would like it to just be the way it is, please. I'm, stable here. I don't want to change. And then, of course, there are those who go back and forth, undecided or uninformed. They are a combination or swayed by whoever they last spoke to or related to as a group. This is a combination of Saturn and Uranus. Change a little, go back. Change a little, go back. And so what we're going to have here, because Jupiter is naturally evolution, Jupiter and Aquarius, we're going to have all three of these categories interfacing. They do all the time, but they're going to kind of intensify through Aquarius. And we'll watch it play out where we become more Uranian progressive with healthcare, say, but we become more Saturnian regressive, and I'm not judging these planets, in regards to vote by mail. There's going to be various concepts and principles. Some will move forward, others will be stuck, and some might even regress depending upon how collectives choose to react or respond. So I'd like to say one more time here, though, that in regards to Jupiter, if we feel alienated from our friends or our groups or family members and loved ones, remember, feeling different or feeling rejected or alienated, it is the potential to think for ourselves and choose what we believe now based upon how information is presenting itself. I have always loved this quote. Beliefs are conditioned thoughts. Change your thoughts, change your beliefs. So can you see how beliefs, Jupiter, are conditioned thoughts, Aquarius, fixed air? And how Jupiter and Aquarius, there's an intent to change how we think and analyze, objectify, etc., which then allows us to change our beliefs. I don't know if this quote's from Einstein or not. I've begun to, I can't remember what that phrase is right now. Grain of salt, kind of, I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know if I can attribute this to him or not. However, I like the sentence. Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. I thought it was very Aquarian when I ran across it. Learn from yesterday, that past, live for today, the suppression of the present coming up, hope for tomorrow. Beauty of those future orientated messages with Jupiter and Aquarius is we get our own intuitive hits on how to move forward. However, the important thing is to never stop questioning. And then I thought it kind of fit. Knowledge is having the right answer. Intelligence, which is in a very, both knowledge and intelligence are Aquarian words, okay? Intelligence is being able to ask the right question, being able to question something, to ask, to want to learn more or know more, to evolve. Now, one of the things that is a distortion of the Leo Aquarius polarity is a concept called social inequality and elitism. We're not guaranteed that Aquarian energy is the rebels and the rabble rousers and making it fair and better for all of us. It depends upon who shows up. So one of the distortions we can have with both Leo and Aquarius is social classes of haves and have-nots. And this can be based upon wealth. This can be based upon racism. This can be based upon countries. This can be based upon all different kinds of social classes. The social inequalities, I think, will be very exposed by both Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. And it will continue to increase when Pluto goes into Aquarius in 23-24. I do think that there will be massive uprisings to redistribute resources and change governmental institutions. I wonder if Jupiter gives us the recognition. Saturn is starting to make the steps. And I wonder if it's Pluto in Aquarius that's really going to give it momentum to change in many broad areas. And of course, the degree of rebellion will also relate to how strongly some of the Capricorn authority power grabs have taken over. Excuse me. Jupiter in Cap 2020, Saturn in Capricorn 18, 19, 20. We're already starting to see with Facebook that we may finally be starting to look at monopolies in which maybe we need to break them up or look at legislating them, regulating them in more fair and equitable ways. And the monopolistic concentration started with Uranus and Neptune's transits in Capricorn. Okay. Their 1993 conjunctions, which come once every 172 years. And then they were followed by Pluto in Capricorn 2008 to 2023, 24. Stay tuned. That's an area where we might see all kinds of things start to take place. And I have a chart for you on that. Remember, though, in regards to this social inequality, a deeper archetype of Aquarius is creating social equality and unity in diversity. Social equality does not mean we're all the same. It does not mean wiping out one race in favor of another. It is being able to be equals regardless of gender, skin color, belief systems, etc. We know this. I also want to just briefly mention, I've used this slide before, but I want you to recognize that Jupiter and Saturn over the next 20 years, with their conjunction and cycle together at 0.5 Aquarius, more slides on that later. To recognize, though, that when planets go through Aquarius, they bring leaps of growth in the field of technology and also mental growth on, these individual and collective areas. And so creating that sensation for us that time has speeded up, this works with technology as well. And you think your little smartphones do a lot of stuff now? Wait till they become the little device where you just hold it up to a part of your body and you don't even go to the doctor. It comes back at you. I'm talking Star Wars, technology here. The device comes back at you and tells you what you need. And in my world with energetic balancing, you then have waves of frequencies that come through and heal, that neutralize a virus in your body, that neutralize an organ, that shrink a tumor. We're going to see this stuff through Pluto and Aquarius. But also, though, the whole basics of this technological thing, I found this fascinating when I first studied this, is understanding the difference between conventional versus quantum computing. Conventional is what we think of as a calculator. It's binary. We can store and compute 1 or 0. We only work with 2 digits and we work with either or. And we start to make those circuit transistors that can compute faster than our brain can do it. They go as small as the physical laws let us. But we're now moving into quantum computing, which is where we are working at an atomic or subatomic level. And in quantum computing, we can store multiple values at the same time. 1, 0, both, or any fraction in between. And so the whole quantum mechanics allows computers to work parallel instead of serial. And the example that we give with that is in quantum physics, light can be the particle or the wave. And I encourage you to study a little more on this if you want to. It's kind of what my energetic balancing work is based upon. It's what's allowing us to have the beginnings of what we call AI, or artificial intelligence. As Jupiter moon transits through Aquarius, we will see this in the news more and more, until on an intuitive level, not just knowledge, but also intuitive, we start to understand quantum physics and quantum computing. And Saturn in Aquarius makes it a reality for us. And then just wait till we have 20 years of Pluto in Aquarius. Oh, mind-boggling? Yeah. We're just opening up to it. But we're going to have these little kids, these little souls who are going to come in and be born this coming, this decade with Jupiter in Aquarius, or, Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, or Pluto when it gets there. And they're going to come in knowing this stuff. So let's look at the chart of someone who we would all perceive to kind of be one of those, because he was able to take the technology of social media and make himself a gazillionaire. I think Mark Zuckerberg has taken over Warren Buffett as the 3rd richest person in the United States. Mark Zuckerberg's chart, I drew it up for 11 p.m., May 14th, 84, White Plains, New York. His time of birth is unknown. However, research by various astrologers, and this is coming from Lois Rodden's databank that's in, I think, astro.com. There are theories of people thinking that late in the day might be his birth time, giving him that Capricorn rising, making him a 10th house Pluto in 0 Capricorn, close to that midheaven, the midheaven Libra, the social media, but all of that Scorpio control of the resources that have been going on. The research about this time period later, the end of the day on the 14th, I didn't know this. Mark Zuckerberg is colorblind, and he doesn't see red and green very well. The color he sees best is blue, and that's why the Facebook colors are blue. Well, in the world of astrology, and I gotta see if I can find this little note. I forgot to look this up. I don't know if I'm gonna find it. I don't know where I quite put it. I don't think I have the folder in front of me. The eyes in health and wellness astrology are ruled by the sun and the moon. So Mark Zuckerberg was born during the day of a full moon. There also happened to be a lunar eclipse. So I drew up the lunar eclipse for next May. We're going to have Jupiter in early Pisces just before it. Let me see if I can figure out where this one is. Nope. Excuse me, just nope. Oops. Oops, escape out of that one. Oh, there it is, right there. We're gonna the inner wheel is his chart. The outer wheel is the transits on the lunar eclipse. Jupiter's in early Pisces before it turns retrograde in June to retrograde back into Aquarius. But he drew it up because Zuckerberg's going to have a lunar return. It's going to be his third lunar return. And it just so happens that this lunar eclipse is going to be very, very close on this nodal axis. If you're not aware of this, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission and 48 of our 50 state attorneys general, the top lawyer in each state, they filed simultaneous lawsuits to break up Facebook. Basically, they want to force it to sell off Instagram and WhatsApp. WhatsApp is the messenger. If you use Facebook and Facebook Messenger, that's WhatsApp. And the whole issue is that in the last decade, or longer, I don't know for sure, Facebook has been buying up any competing social media technology or company. That's what Instagram was, and incorporating them into its own base technology, or it has been forcing any up and moving competitors out of business. And Facebook has been pretty darn ruthless with this. I found it this just came out in the news in the last day or so, and I found it so interesting that 48 out of our 50 state attorneys general went together on a lawsuit. This is all the Republicans and the Democrats. So we're split on the politics of presidents, but boy, we're not on breaking up one of the biggest corporations that we have in our country. So this is just some insight into you of what can start to happen with not only Jupiter in Aquarius, the lawsuits, Saturn in Aquarius, the changing of laws. We've had antitrust laws on the books forever. If you can remember back far enough, my mom was a telephone operator. She worked for AT&T as a telephone operator, and I used to be able to go behind the locked doors as a little girl and go up and watch those women in a row pulling and pulling and pushing in all those switches that allowed us to make those long distance phone calls. My mom knew every area code in the United States. I remember when they broke up Ma Bell, and my mom was very sad. That was one of the biggest antitrust lawsuits way back when. I think we'll see a whole nother wave of these with both Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. Axe always falls on the tallest tree. Mark, it's going to be interesting to watch how this unfolds in his chart. And of course, Jupiter, as you can see by transit before it goes retrograde, when it goes retrograde, early Pisces, it's going to square the nodal axis in his chart natally. If you look at this right here, seeing this go on. And of course, as we're looking at Jupiter just getting ready to move into 0 degrees Aquarius, here it is, making a square to that Pluto natally at 0 degrees Scorpio retrograde. And we're looking at the time of that lunar eclipse, Saturn in Aquarius squaring this natal Saturn at 12 Scorpio, new phase Pluto retrograde. This is the ruthlessness and control right here. Not that we won't see it with Mars in Scorpio as well. And chances are he's a moon in Scorpio, regardless of what time on May 14th he's born. And that moon's going to be anywhere from 7-8 degrees to 24 Scorpio in his chart. So there's more to it, but the whole point is how Aquarius, can break up Capricorn crystallizations and controls and monopolies. And look at what we've seen happening with all kinds of various industries through Pluto and Capricorn. And how Aquarius can come along and go, I don't think so. I don't know about this. Now, there can be more archetypes to Jupiter and Aquarius. I may have missed some. If there's something you want me to speak about, by all means, send us a little email and I'll address it through the houses in part 2, right at the beginning, or you can speak up now if you want. I just wanted to just briefly touch upon the Leo polarity, which is the opposite of Aquarius. And this will be true when Jupiter's retrograding back into Aquarius in the polarity Leo. That polarity intent is to break free from the traumas of the past and resistance to change, finding the courage, Leo, to create Leo and live life, Leo, versus envisioning that future, Jupiter in Aquarius, but not doing anything about it, remaining stuck in those old fixed air thought patterns and repeating the same old actions. If we don't find the Leonian courage, we can intensify the traumatic upsets. And so the Leo polarity is recognizing that every soul has that unique creative spark, Leo, to contribute to the evolution Jupiter of humanity, Aquarius. Now, if we are stuck because Leo is fixed fire, Aquarius is fixed air, the fixed quadrant. If we are not willing to evolve, there may be those Leo dramas and Aquarian traumas that force us inward to self-reflect, to objectify, to self-love Leo. And if we are emotionally immature or insecure, we will double down on trying to project the past forward. We will also find individuals, Leo, I'm me, the sun. We will gravitate towards those who are like-minded for the courage to support our creative ideas. Now, this can happen both progressively and conservatively. And this can happen in supporting the past. Those who are in the United States, the Republican Trumpers who are going crazy right now because they want to go back to the past, and Don's their guy. Oh my God, he's a god. and he won. And, so past, present, and future, do we have that ability to really have that spark to be ourself in the world? Or are we going to look for those who will support our beliefs, our interpretations of what we think or believe is true? And we'll look for that group to try and do it with us and who has the same creative ideas with us. So as you can see, even the Leo polarity can be distorted or can be naturally expressed. I'm going to move on for sake of time. In EA, we always work with what we call the cycle of phases and aspects from 0 to 360. If this is new, you have this slide that you can look at. Your studies was first brought forth by Dane Rudier. Jeffrey Green used it, and I made a few changes here and there to it to create as what you see on your screen here. So here's that Jupiter retrograde cycle again. As you can see, Jupiter is retrograde from June 20th to October 18th, that approximate 4 months that we're looking at. That's not all we're going to look at for Jupiter aspects, but that's what we'll create between pre-shadow, retrograde, and post-shadow. Some of Jupiter's 3 passages or 3 aspects with outer planets as we go forward. This is true. You can substitute Jupiter for any planet. The transiting planetary retrograde cycle is always related back to that natal planetary archetype by sign house aspect. So you can look at this with your own Jupiter. Where is your own Jupiter natally, by sign, by house, by aspect? And so wherever Jupiter is retrograding in Aquarius or by houses, and we'll look at that in part 2, okay? It's transit and it's retrograde. While that can be some of the issues you currently move through, it's still going to relate back to wherever your natal Jupiter signature is. So again, you can take some time to reflect on this whole concept. Now, Jupiter will go retrograde for 1 month in the first 2 degrees of Pisces, relating to the Virgo polarity. During that month, what do we believe on deepest levels possible? Jupiter is our conscious beliefs. Pisces are those deepest levels of unconscious beliefs. And here we can fall into disbelief or disillusionment. We could want to do the Piscean escapism or avoidance or neglect. And we need to be searching for that next connection to universal source on a daily practical basis, Virgo. And then as Jupiter retrogrades back into Aquarius, which it will do for 3 months, what is my role in society? So, are we going to ignore humanity and go into our Leonian selfishness? Are we just going to escape into our social media or our technology? COVID forced to stay home. How many of us made a new friendship, Aquarius, with Netflix or whatever your streaming services are? We can use that as escapism too. When Jupiter is retrograde back to Aquarius, it can really be a time period for reviewing trauma and trying to become more objective about what happened so that we can liberate ourselves from the past and liberate ourselves from any old beliefs that hold us back. And then we are meant to go forward, searching for personal productivity in this changing world that we are in the midst of. Now, while I have some slides with the inner planets separately to Jupiter, I always like to look at them as a group because they travel fairly close together with the exception of Mars. Mercury and Venus are never very far from the sun. And so they make their conjunctions together, they make their oppositions, they do all their, aspects kind of in tandem, so to speak. So I like to group them together. And if we look at the first set here where we have the conjunctions to Jupiter, I'll go in detail on Mercury in the next slide. I just want to point out here, though, that, and again, here's a Mercury retrograde, 3 of them here when Mercury goes retrograde in Aquarius. This early time period, January, February, there's going to be a lot of stuff busting up, breaking free. There's going to be wake-up calls and there's going to be traumas. Will there be marching in the streets because we have a certain faction of the United States that refuses to accept Joe Biden as the new president? Stay tuned. I'm just giving this to you as timing and as theme. I think we can see maybe both positive and negative happening here. This just always tends to be the case. Um, I think what we'll see maybe is those who refuse to accept Joe Biden be the ones kind of upset and out in the streets here. But as we get to the summer, when these inner planets make these oppositions to Jupiter, all right, that can be when we start to see more perhaps progressive rebellions take place. Not guaranteed, but I kind of see that theme wise. And then, of course, we will have them make conjunctions to um, Jupiter again, moving into Pisces and Aries. And I've already been intuiting ahead to Jupiter in Pisces, which, you know, in traditional astrology, Jupiter's, I forget what the word's called. Jupiter is very well liked. But will we have escapism or more inspired activism to really move us forward? Stay tuned. Time will tell. But I just want you to kind of put these 3 time periods in your mind almost. Now, here is Mercury and Jupiter. I'm going to give you the dates first. Mercury's going to have 2 retrograde cycles in which it makes aspects to Jupiter. The first one is going to be early next year when it is retrograde in Aquarius and it makes 3 conjunctions to Jupiter. Then it's not going to make any aspects retrograde in Gemini, and the last retrograde in 21 in Libra. Jupiter will make 3 trines. These would be waning trines to Mercury will make 3 waning trines to Jupiter. You can see dates and degrees here on your screen. So 2021 is going to be an active year for Mercury and Jupiter. In EA, Mercury's left brain, you know, that logical, analytical, 1 + 1 = 2 brain. Jupiter again is that right brain, the intuitive brain that, you know, the whole is greater than the parts that make it up. So they are a very connected planetary pair with each other. And the fact that they're going to be so active with each other, Mercury acts as that messenger with Jupiter in Aquarius, both mentally in communications and with actions. And so you'll see this in the next Mercury retrograde webinar that we do. In 2021, Jupiter's 3 retrograde cycles are completely in air signs. Jupiter is in Aquarius, Gemini, and Libra almost 7 months out of the year. Jupiter going into air signs half of the year next year. Can you see how it stirs up communications? Can you see how it stirs up social media, the news, everything that you want to think of with the mental element of air signs? And here's Jupiter right in the middle of it. Who's right? Who's wrong? So any type of communication is going to be very active. It will have masses continuing to rise up and protest. But starting to say towards people, because, you know, I even have non-astrologers. I have family members and friends who've known Kim Marie's been an astrologer for a long time. Well, what's in the stars? My hairdresser, who I see every 6, 7 weeks, every time. Okay, Kim, what's in the stars for us now? And, you know, we're dear, dear friends, and she is very active in her Christianity. And yet we've been friends for so long that we can talk. And because I practice spiritual astrology, we can find language to speak together. So everybody's been asking, okay, Kim, do we get a break? Can we rest from 2020? And I've been starting to say, No, I don't think 2021 is going to slow down. And I think a lot of it's Jupiter in Aquarius, because we're going to have intuitive hits sparking left and right, conservative and liberal, past and future, and they're going to mix it up all over the place. And Mercury's going to be in the middle of it, stirring the pot, so to speak. Time's going to tell how it's going to unfold. And this is why I said, how are you going to choose to be active? And I think that it's going to put even more pressure on large social media groups. Saturn in Aquarius, how are we going to regulate those social media platforms? As I already talked about, the US starting to sue Facebook. Who else is going to be second and third and follow through? It's going to, out of all of Joe Biden's pick for cabinet, I am most interested in who he picks for his attorney general, because that's the person who's got to implement the Justice Department. Stay tuned. We'll also see this conservative media in the news. What is it called? Newsmax and America One Network. They're even further to the right than Fox News. And that's Trump's breaking away from Fox News and aligning himself with those to go even further with right-wing conspiracy theories. I'm going to say, for however you feel safe to travel next year with Jupiter, unplug once in a while and really give yourself a break from the news and the media, because it's going to be quite active and stirred up. And if you unplug, it's going to give Jupiter and Aquarius a chance for your own intuition to spark, especially if you can surround yourself in nature and what we will call natural law, then your own truth can spark and your own higher alignments can spark. Venus isn't very active with Jupiter in regards to aspects. However, Jupiter is going to have a retrograde cycle the tail end of 21 into 22 in Capricorn. We're going to have one more review of all that Capricorn stuff. Jupiter will move into Pisces in the middle of that retrograde. But they're still going to be working together. They're still got their phasal relationships going on. And I thought about it, and I thought that we're going to quietly evolve our values as our belief systems and social systems undergo the traumas of financial upsets in a post-virus world. It was a sentence that came to me when I pondered intuitively Venus and Jupiter, because they're both money planets. And to think that for the most part, in many countries, this virus has the potential to set us back financially in a lot of areas of the world. They say something like 17% of restaurants in the United States have permanently closed down. Some have said as high as 40 restaurants could close down. And if we don't bring support for the masses, it's going to be a long, long economic recovery. And there are those who say that's what the Republicans want, so they can get, both houses of Congress back in 2022. I have a tendency to think that the more we set ourselves back financially, the more we will see rebellions in the street, because people are hungry. The feed banks across the world are just exploding with demand. So Venus, Jupiter, how will we value and support our social support systems? Which means how do we value our citizens? Will there be financial redistributions of wealth inequalities with Jupiter in Aquarius? Stay tuned. I've used this slide before. Prosperity for all, 6 economic steps, better life, prosperity for all, from 2013. People's Bank, my pet peeve, my soapbox. I espouse on all the time. I got a slide on that. Universal healthcare, building community aspects rather than selling them off. Leveraging city aspects to create people's banks, organizing for the long haul, cutting corporate power down to size. Remember the US, 4.5% of the world's population? We consume 22% of the world's oil, 13% of the world's coal, and 21% of natural gas. Whew. That is not sustainable, no matter how you look at it. Tell me Aquarius won't create some changes there. More on climate change to come. Here's some Mars aspects. You know, Mars is just finishing up the third and final waxing squares to Pluto, then Saturn, and finally Jupiter. And the third and final one to Jupiter is going to be right around Inauguration Day. Oh, that, by the way, I think that's also when Jupiter is going to be squaring Uranus. I'm quickly looking through my slides to see if I am remembering that right for you. Yep, the one Jupiter-Uranus square is January 17th. So I suspect that the inauguration is going to be an intense time. And I don't know how much converging we citizens will do on Washington, whatever they call that, the big avenue that they go for. I think Biden's going to go more virtual, but I think we might see a fair amount of protesting in the street, positive and negative. But, you know, Jupiter in Aries has been about initiating the masses to stand up and fight these Capricorn power structures, which of course are fighting back. Will we see any social inequalities bringing about the massive protests? Remember I said when those inner planets are all opposing Jupiter in the summer, that's when we may see protests again rising up, not just because it's summertime, the inner planets opposing Jupiter and opposing Saturn too. Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. I put in the transits of Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto in Capricorn. So you've got some dates that go all the way up to 2044. Quite possible not many of us will be around when that date comes to pass. But you can see here the dates of Saturn in Aquarius. This might be the 17th. I think my hit list drew it up wrong, but you can see here Saturn in Aquarius. It's the 17th in the US, the 19th, and then their conjunction on the 21st. Jupiter in and out, Saturn in Pisces or in Aquarius till March of 23. A few days later, Saturn into Pisces, Pluto goes into Aquarius. If you haven't recognized this yet, Pluto will have 2 retrograde cycles back into Capricorn, 23, 24, before it spends 19 years in Aquarius. Pluto's elliptical orbit goes from 20 to 30 years in a sign. 15 years in Capricorn, it will be 19 years in Aquarius. So just wanted you to kind of see these dates as we're looking at the beginning of these first few years here and how this Aquarius onslaught is starting to happen. Here is the conjunction of Jupiter Saturn. I did 0 degrees Aries for Washington, D.C. I made it generic. It's a pretty active chart. Every planet is aspecting something somewhere. Neptune square the nodes. We have both Jupiter and Saturn in their conjunction with an orb of the squares to Uranus already filling in those last quarter squares, crises in consciousness and belief. But I also see rebellion because of resources, Uranus in Aquarius. We see Mars in a pretty tight square to Pluto. The last of those squares with Mars no, not the last, excuse me, the first. The Saturn and Jupiter follow. But the thing that astrologers are really speaking about here is that this Jupiter Saturn conjunction and their 20-year cycles, I'll have the slides coming, there's a shift from 200-year cycles in which the conjunctions are in earth signs to having the next 200 years of Jupiter Saturn conjunctions, seed thoughts of the 20-year cycle, moving into air signs. So there's a huge shift from physical to mental themes. Or as Catherine Urban, I picked this up from another astrologer, she said going from accumulation to circulation. I brought in the materialism to concepts. If you think back of 200 years of Jupiter Saturn cycles, the conjunctions initiating in earth signs, just think of how the material the last 200 years have been. In many parts of the world, we're just reaching saturation points. And when we look at it from the perspective of sustainability on planet Earth, we all can't live like we do in the United States. There's going to be a material downsizing in the US. There will be some catch up for other countries, but there's going to reach a point where we just can't sustain this amount of resource use the way that we have. And so, can you ponder 200 years of really moving into ideas and books and concepts and communications and, the whole networking socially being more important than stuff? That's probably the biggest concept that we are looking at with the Jupiter Saturn conjunctions. And I could get into more ideas, but I'm just going to give credit to someone else who I think wrote it better than me. Many of you, well, one more slide, then I'll go into that, or a couple more slides. I guess I do have a couple of my opinions in here. So basically, we're looking at a 20-year cycle governing societal expansions and contractions. Jupiter expands, Saturn contracts. And these 20-year cycles create our laws, rules, functions, norms, customs, opinions, taboos. Or in other words, philosophical beliefs and principles are legalized into law. It creates those Saturnian standards of conduct which we judge when we violate both Jupiter and Saturn. It creates that pressure to conform to the consensus rules and norms. Saturn is the outermost planet in the planetary pair of Jupiter and Saturn. As I said before, Jupiter and Saturn will set the stage for Pluto's ingress into Aquarius. And all these Aquarius transits are going to bring pressure to break down those Capricorn standards of conduct and pressures to conform. Distortions, we can have even more elitism, class warfare, racial discrimination, but we have the potential to evolve our social support systems, our government, and its functions that it is meant to do to support its citizens, however necessary. So this is a cycle about evolving our beliefs and structure of consciousness, Jupiter, Saturn, individually and collectively. Aquarius is going to attempt to break down the unconsciousness not only with Uranus, it will also do it with Neptune and Pluto as well. That's a whole concept we can think of for ourselves. If we look at it from consensus consciousness, again, it's almost like that Saturnian reaction we talked about before, where we want to cling to the past or outdated social classes. I have it, you don't. Racial and gender inequalities and prejudices. If we're individuating, this is the Uranian consciousness. We want to rebel. We want things to move forward. Spirituated consciousness is more Neptunian. This is where we've got the ability to understand and process through the fears of losing control with change, evolution, adapting to a global planet. Aquarius, just by virtue of moving us forward, can create trauma for so many, because yesterday doesn't work anymore, but tomorrow's not here. And so it becomes important with the spirituated consciousness and the Jupiter-Saturn cycle that we share these natural principles of surviving better together. Aquarius. Those are my 2 slides of thoughts. Here's the slide I was going to point to that I jumped ahead to. Some of you may know that Ray Merriman was president of ESAR for several years. And in April, he wrote this article. I actually came across it from another astrologer, and I went back and had the article sitting on my desk for a couple of months. And oh, wait a minute, I think I remember this. I want to give Ray credit. He says it better than any of us. And so I'm just going to quickly read what he espoused on. A new era of world leadership and the emergence of bold new leaders espousing themes such as social justice, greater liberties and rights for individuals via new laws and abolishment of older oppressive laws. Period may start with social upheavals, even revolutions, in which current leaders are either voted out of office or forced or removed forcibly. Stay tuned. Inquisitions, modern day, hopefully, and investigations increase early in this period. Antitrust laws, anybody? Collective values begin to change, transitioning the status given to personal accumulated wealth towards more the expression of intellectual, creative, and artistic endeavors. A rise of socialism or a hybrid of socialism over capitalism as a base of economic and governmental structures. And he said the rise of prominence of China on the world stage. And the reason for this is China's chart has early degrees Aquarius rising. And of course, we've got the conjunction at 0.5 degrees Aquarius. The resumption of a renaissance in technology and connectivity of people across the globe. We're going to become global citizens with our smartphones and social medias, and whoever owns which one, they're going to all have to connect together, not have monopolies. I'll have more on this in the 2021 forecast. I also wanted to point out Jupiter, Chiron, and Neptune. How many of you remember their conjunctions back in 2009? I do. I was about a decade into my energetic balancing work, which is based upon quantum physics, which is where we take a photograph and impart healing frequencies to you via your photograph 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Quantum physics, I was all excited about it. And Jupiter during that time period, 3 conjunctions in Aquarius. So the last Jupiter Chiron cycle initiated Aquarius. Neptune, Jupiter, 3 conjunctions to Neptune. Their last cycle was initiated Aquarius. And then of course we had in 2010, 1 Chiron conjunction to Neptune, February of 2010 at 26 Aquarius. If you don't remember this, Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, was signed into law March of 2010. Chiron, healing, Neptune, ruling the health system. here in the United States, that was remarkable. Remember how this created the rise of the protesters called the Tea Party, who thought Obamacare was the worst thing possible? Look at it now, 10 years later. So together, these three planets brought about a collective consciousness recognizing the mind-body connection of quantum physics and self-healing. More and more of us recognizing that mind-body connection. Change your thoughts, change your beliefs, change your thoughts, change your body. And of course, one more time, initiating the whole AI and technology. And here again, I told you, passage of the Affordable Care Act. And also, remember, this was the first year we had our Black president and the hope we had for that. And the backlash uprising of white supremacism that didn't start, has always been there in the US, but really came back to the surface as the counter-protesting. So Jupiter is going to make 3 waxing sesquisquadrates. Waning sesquisquadrates. It's almost a cycle around to Chiron because it's going to have their next conjunction in 23 in Aries. Waning sesquisquadrates going to balsamic phase from last quarter. And so, if we want to be specific with that balsamic phase means recognizing the deeper societal effects of selfishness, Chiron in Aries, and healthcare failures at all costs. So why, thank you international listeners for letting me use the US as an example. So why we initiated the concept of, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, maybe universal health care, had such rebellion in the United States. And 10 years of the Republican Party doing everything they can to destroy it. And now we come across a real crisis where we really need it. And so Jupiter balsamic Chiron is recognizing this, failure to take care of our citizens. And so it can be setting germinating seed thoughts. Balsamic phase germinates seed thoughts that then get implemented in new phase post conjunction between 2 planets. So we can have insights here into moving forward with new healing modalities, both traditional and alternative. Maybe the quantum physics role in self-healing, like the energetic balancing that I'm involved with, or alternative modalities for self-healing all the viral contagions, mega doses of vitamin C that they talk about, mega doses, or not so much mega doses of vitamin D, but really being on the high end of vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. And so you have to take it over long periods of time. It has to build up in the fatty tissues of your body to really be usable in your system. And so they've been saying over the course of 2020 that here again, the research is showing that the higher the levels of vitamin D in your body, the higher they are to the normal range, not overdosing. And that's a tough thing to do. But the higher levels of normal, the greater you can fight off COVID, the less symptoms you will have. Look that up on the internet if you're interested in that. I think we're going to have insights. We put it through a vaccine in the traditional world faster than we ever have. Most vaccines are 3 to 4 year processes, and we did it in a year. But we also will look with these 2 planets at how do we heal those long-term effects of trauma from COVID-19. Leroy lost his brother, and we have a sister who has been in denial that he died of COVID. And we finally just had to make peace and allow her to be where she is at for the sake of family relationship. But we're just like, how can you, how do you deny that? Those who are very conservative and, deny COVID exists on their deathbed. So there's a lot to be healed with just Jupiter and Chiron here over the next year. And Chiron in Aries is to initiate new ways to heal. Here's my energetic balancing side. If you're interested in more information, you can contact Leroy and I. This is our facilitator website. I've been involved in this work for 20 years. This is the book. It's a spiritual novel instead of dry quantum physics. It is a novel of how a woman self-heals her cancer. Everything in the book is true. We last winter discovered 16 mutating flu or viral imbalances and added the balancing frequencies to our program. We're just starting this year. I don't know what the count is through this flu season, but we've found 11 variations of coronavirus, and we have 11 coronavirus frequencies. If you're not aware of it, Leroy and I were exposed to the virus in October. I was asymptomatic. My biggest symptom was tiredness. We both moved through COVID fairly easily. Neither one of us had long-term side effects. My case was so mild, I didn't have the antibodies to give plasma. Leroy, though, he has a mild case, but he created enough antibodies to give the donation of plasma. If you're interested in more, I love this work. I love it as much as I do evolutionary astrology. I feel very, very blessed with these two spiritual jobs. Enough of that. Jupiter Uranus. There's only one last quarter square between Jupiter and Uranus, as I said earlier, right around the presidential inauguration. In the US, it takes place every 4 years, January 20th at 12 noon in Washington, D.C. We will have 3 Saturn last quarter squares to Uranus, though, in 21. They're going to be the heavy hitters. And so Uranus and Taurus, how can we not have more climate change events? How can we not have more financial traumas with just basic survival for the workers who've lost their jobs? I won't go over the details. You get the picture. The last quarter squares are crises in consciousness or our beliefs, Jupiter. What no longer works in our world. Now, because it's Aquarius Taurus, there can be fear of change. And so we want to defend the past, defend the past. And yet, Aquarius trauma, Uranus and Taurus, I think there's going to continue to, again, be all kinds of upsets. So it really is working on that Taurian inner security and your basic survival. And to me, it's choosing how to be active socially for the support of all of us. We could be looking at recession yet. Neptune is not done making oppositions to itself. More details on this in the 21 forecast. So there's the long-term effects of COVID are the financial changes and traumas that can still happen. And of course, the climate change events. And that includes an awareness that technology, Aquarius, has got to adapt to minimize the effects upon planet Earth. We've got to learn how to start recycling our garbage dumps. I've said that for a long, long time. We'll get there. We'll get there where recycling will become intense recycling with minimal waste will become the norm because we have no choice. So social upheavals, financial upheavals, technological breakthroughs and upheavals, climate change upheavals. Saturn Uranus is just going to make it a bugaboo next year. And all the time, Jupiter's going to move through Aquarius and be part of that picture. Aha moments, maybe. Here is my public bank slide that I have in my new book by Ellen Brown, which I did take the time to read through all this summer. She is my hero. She talks about making banking a public utility like electricity and gas rather than the upper 1%, making profits off of us while we starve. I still think that this is the wave of the future and it's going to go the way of cannabis. And if you are a follower of me, you've heard me say this multiple times. I'll let you go research this information for yourself if you want. As we look at Jupiter in Aquarius, as we look at Saturn in Aquarius, we can see this taking off. It's been growing on that grassroots level. I've been a part of it for a dozen years now. As we get past Pluto and Capricorn and into Aquarius, I think we really can see some changes start to take place here. I highly invite you to read this book and join publicbankinginstitute.org. Jupiter, Pluto, well, we all know they had 3 conjunctions together. And now they're actually going to move into having 3 semi-sextiles. The Jupiter-Pluto cycle is a 12-year cycle. Basically, just because Jupiter moves so fast. These are these waxing semi-sextiles, the initial attempts to break free from patriarchal structures no longer supported in reality. How does capitalism at all costs, little cap, affect the masses? Jupiter Aquarius. Our belief systems can receive some shocks that cause a deeper look at how we become more self-responsible. It's the deeper message of Pluto and Capricorn. But it's kind of hard to do when you have social support systems and societies that do everything they can to undermine self-responsibility. The role and function of government is to look after the collective and not choose who wins, who loses. Stay tuned. These two will have their voice in the next year in Jupiter and Aquarius, even if we don't even notice these aspects going on. I did put the United States chart in, the Gemini rising chart for July 4th to 13. I want to point out that in 21, we're still going to have Pluto making oppositions to Mercury. There are 5 of them, 2020, 21, before we finally have the first Pluto conjunctions to the natal US chart. I drew up the solar eclipse for June of next year because it's going to be smack dab here on Mars, and the transiting north nodes of the moon will be on Uranus. So again, there may be some summer activities going on. Jupiter's already moved into Pisces as it's getting ready to turn retrograde in another 10 days. We have Uranus here sandwiched in Aquarius between South Node and the moon. The United States for any time on July 14th has a South Node in Aquarius. This is why we have seen masses rise up and protest from time to time. The moon rules the public in a mundane or collective chart. And we're going to see Jupiter's going to retrograde back to 22 Aquarius, so it won't really go. If you use the Sibley chart, I think the moon's in the 20s in Aquarius. I think Jupiter will go over it 3 times. Saturn will take a while before it goes over the US moon, but you see the activism of the eclipses next year. You see the activism of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. Now here's the dates for you. I bolded the Jupiter dates over the south node early next year. One trine to Uranus, one trine to Saturn, and then its conjunction to the moon, trine to Mars. So Jupiter in Aquarius will be activating the US chart. Time will tell as to whether the progressives are in the street, the street, or both are in the street, and whose voices are the loudest. I don't know if we're going to really be able to discern that in 21, maybe by 22, 23, 24, as the decade goes by. That chant for fairness and equality for all is going to get louder, louder, louder. I also put the dates of transiting Saturn in for you, and the progressed moon in the US chart, in the July 4th chart, at least the 2:13 a.m. chart, is going to go into Aquarius for 2 years. So I put a few of those aspects in so you can realize that there's going to be another undercurrent to the picture in the US chart in regards to all that Aquarian energy. Finally, Jupiter does make a couple aspects to the nodes, and we will have Jupiter finally square the nodes at 0, 1 degree, Pisces, Gemini, Sag. So as we go through the, let's say the last 3 months, 4 months of Jupiter in Aquarius, it'll be coming closer and closer and closer to squaring the nodes. What do we believe? Who has the truth? What is the broadest level of truth that I can understand? All right, any questions or comments? You can let me know as I go through the last slides. I wanted to point out to you, with Jupiter conjunct Pluto and then now coming up with a conjunction to Saturn, that between 20 and 24, in a space of 4 years here, Jupiter is going to conjunct all 5 of the outer planets, including Chiron in that. So you can see that we really have cycles of old belief systems and social support systems kind of coming to closure with then a 4-year history of all kinds of new ones being born, rebirthed, evolved as we go through this next decade. So Jupiter will be quite active in this whole process of evolution with the outer planets. What upsets us and how do we make sense of it? All right, I did the slide. Again, this will be a hyperlink for you with being able to go into the 2021 forecast. If you are interested in that, I will focus some of these ideas a little more expanded as we go into the year. And then again, with everybody tearing up our roof, we have to have some windows replaced. Our Wednesday got turned topsy-turvy. So, and I just decided I wanted to have the winter solstice off. Actually, I've got work to do, so we're gonna look at part 2, Jupiter and Aquarius through the 12 houses, Monday, December 28th. And as Leroy said, be looking in your inbox as to the links. You'll get the link a day before Sunday, the 27th, and then you'll get the link an hour before in your email inbox on Monday, the 28th. All right. Any comments, questions, Leroy? Any?
Well, just one modification. You put up a link on the forecasting webinars page. What we've come to look at and understand over the years with these forecasting webinars is that nobody enrolls on our website. We always enroll people through the event newsletter out of Constant Contact. So
Yep.
After the forecasting event, I'll post it in the on the forecasting webinars page to get the PDF with all the links. But prior to it, the enrollment process is always through the newsletter. So it's kind of a
Thank you,
nice
honey.
slick deal with Constant Contact. And so we've just 90% of them have always come through there. So we just kind of went to that exclusively. So everybody on this call, for sure, if I got the names right, know that by now. And I just wanted to make that little amendment. So we'll change that link in the PDF and get that out to everybody at the right time here, next couple 24 to 48 hours.
All right. Thank you, Meaty Monk. Leroy. All right, everyone. I'll see you in 2 weeks.